the number one lie I hear from men that drive dysfunction in their life is, I'm only worth what I can contribute. We're telling our wife, you're the person responsible for bearing the weight of my purpose and identity. And that's a burden your wife should not have to bear. Do you believe you're of worth? Do you believe you're worth love? And they have to work on, where do they get validation? When you live your life trying to find your sense of worth for other people, whoever they are, like they are the ones who participate in the forming of your identity and they get to determine it. So whenever they fall apart, you fall apart.
What's good, fatherhood? Rob Bill Jr. here, coming to you live with another episode of Uncommon, the Dad Work podcast with Daniel Grose. I'm so very excited to have him on today. I have you on, Daniel. He's married, father of four, honest fatherhood coach. Brother, welcome to the
Yeah, man.
space.
Excited to be here.
Yeah. Yeah, we were talking a little bit right before this, and I was talking about my sons. I was never somebody who wanted kids, and now it's like it has become the greatest gift that I never knew that I wanted. And we hear all this talk about the differences between boys and girls, especially in a culture that up until recently has wanted them to be the same and puts them in classrooms and treats them the same. And man, there's such a difference between my son and my daughter. Yeah, they're different ages, but my son, he has, I would say, when he gets upset, he goes full Vegeta. Like it's this hot, high intensity energy that comes out of him. My daughter, it's the tears, it's the sadness, it's different emotions, different energies. And I can see the differences in them, how just high intensity he is, and how she can just sit down and just be like, open a book and read. And I'm learning on the job that it's very different raising a boy than a girl. And I know that you're so big on that. You're so big on raising boys to be men. And you've got four, so I can't imagine what four is like. Why don't we begin there, man? Uh yeah, what do you see? I know your whole life revolves around breathing and living to raise your sons. So what got you into this? And what woke you up to that importance of raising boys, not just to be adults, but to be men?
Um, I would, I have to say what got me into it was probably the struggles in my marriage before I had boys or when my boys were really young. And when I started to see how much of the baggage, the wounding, like the stuff that I had came from my own childhood growing up. I mean, my story, it's a long story, so I won't get into all of it unless
You
you want
can
to go there.
go. You can go. We
But,
have time. Let's go.
yeah. So, man, my mom and dad divorced when I was 4 years old. So he's my biological father. I call him Cecil. He was never around. I called him Cecil even when they were married. I didn't call him dad until she got remarried, and he said, "Will you call me dad?" Because there was a little competition there. Um, but yeah, they got divorced. My mom remarried when I was 5 years old to my stepdad, who I actually called dad. And I loved him, man. He was a fireman. He came in like knight in shining armor. Like he wrestled with me, taught me how to throw a left jab, throw a baseball, right? He would take me with him to work. He was a fireman, but he cut grass on the side. I would just like ride around in the truck and try to like hold his little blower. It was like shaking my whole body. But like just to be included in everything he did. Like I loved him with reckless abandon. And it was great. Um when I was 10 years old, I two things happened to me when I was 10. One, my biological father, Cecil, I got to tell you, I did not know he was an addict. I did not know he was a narcissist or that he was unfaithful to my mom. My mom never spoke ill of him ever. She didn't want to do that to me. So I still thought he was this awesome guy. And I went and visited him every other weekend and, holidays sometimes, and loved him. And it was spring break of fourth grade. My stepdad calls me in, says, "Son, sit down. I need to tell you something." He was somber in a way I'd never heard him be before. And he said, "Look, your father shot his girlfriend and he's on the run from the police. We don't know where he is. And we think he might try to come around and see you or come get you. We need you to come inside the house and stay in. And, he didn't know what kind of effect that was going to have on me. But when I heard it, it was the closest thing I've ever had. I think it's like an out of body experience. There's a panic attack. Like my body, like I started feeling it was hard to breathe. I felt like I was sinking in my chair. My brain just couldn't accept it. It felt like something from a movie. Like, how could Cecil, this man I love, have shot this girl, Jamie? I knew her kids, and it was just nuts. And like, now he's on the run from the police and might come get me. Um, so like I stood up. I was gonna try to go to my bedroom and cry. I made it about 5 steps, just fell on the floor, and my stepdad picked me up. Well, I just cried out, "Why?" Like, over and over again, just crying, "Why?" And he held me there, and, so I lost my biological father in that moment. He ended up going to prison for first-degree murder and died there, just about 6 years ago, 6, 7 years ago. In his last year of his 25-year life sentence, he died of cancer in prison. Then my stepfather, he had been an addict, was recently sober when he married my mom back when I was 5. He got hurt on a job and was prescribed some prescription painkillers, and that sent him right back. He relapsed into drug addiction. Over the course of that year from age 10 to 11, I lost 2 fathers, one in a moment and one over the slow regression into drug use. And so the man who had been my hero now basically became my worst nightmare, somebody I was afraid of at all times. I mean, dads back in the 80s and 90s were already a different breed. I mean, discipline was different. They weren't quite as enlightened, right? They were a little harder, rough around the edges. He was a fireman. He was kind of hard anyway. He was bipolar. He was a hot headed Italian, and now he was a drug addict. So his ups and downs were huge ups and downs. It was either like, "Hey, let's all go on vacation today. Like, we're going to go out to a lake. We're going to rent some jet skis and stuff." Just great time. Everyone loved him. Or it was smashing TVs, throwing dishes, cussing people out. And it was hard growing up. I mean, we just came home from school, threw our book bags on the front porch, me and my brothers, and stayed outside. We were scared to be
Mm,
around him because he could have lost the TV remote himself, thought you did it, and you'd get smacked for it, knowing it had nothing to do with you. We just stayed away from him. And we went through series of like a pinnacle moment would happen. Like me and him got in a fist fight one time. He pulled out some of my hair. It was this big thing. We moved out for a while. He promised to go to rehab. He went, he came back, and then life would happen. He'd get back on drugs and we would go through the same cycle over and over again. So my whole childhood was this chaotic thing where we left, we came back. I mean, there were some hard moments. I remember wrestling a gun out of his hand one day because he had written a suicide note, was going to commit suicide. And I'd go outside and there's like 10 police cars around my house because my mom knew it, but I was the only one home with him. And like I saw these police like train their guns on him in front of the driveway, and I thought, like, I'm about to watch my dad get shot in front of me. And in that moment, he literally said, "Just shoot me. I'm killing myself anyway." And he looked up and saw me. And I think in that moment, he was like, I'm not going to let my son watch this, and laid his gun down and then was arrested and went. So it was all over the place. And man, for me personally, I found faith when I was 17, did a lot of healing work then and early on into college, and left the home and went to Los Angeles, California, where I met my wife, and thought I had healed and left all that stuff behind. And it wasn't until 5 years into our marriage, after my second son was born and around 6 months old, that finally the weight of providing and being a good husband and being a good father and all the demands that were on me were heavy enough that the cracks in my identity and even just my practical skill sets as a man started to break. And I had some really hard moments where I realized, like, I don't believe in divorce. I love my wife. I'm not a drug addict. I'm not a narcissist like my biological father. I'm a good dude and I'm trying, but somehow this thing is still falling apart. And I'm going to lose my wife and sons if something doesn't change. And that marked a huge moment for me of brokenness where I just all of a sudden surrendered. I was like, whatever must die in me or change or need to be healed, I will go all in on whatever needs to happen. That was about 11 years ago. And my life has completely changed. Like I said, man, I love my wife so much. To me, she's the best thing on this planet. And I would rather be with my four boys than anywhere, right? I have to leave to go for a work gig somewhere and do a speaking engagement, and I'm gone for 2 days. I'm like, it's fun. I love what I do. I hate being away from my kids. Like, if I can take one of them with me, I'll bring one of them with me. I love my family. I'm like, I went through a lot of hardship to to come to a place where I must heal, and then did, and it changed everything in my life. But realizing how much of the suffering my wife went through and the anguish I went through in those early years of marriage and parenting was related to being afraid of being like my father and trying to prove I was a different
Mm.
man. And those unaddressed father wounds really made me focus on I have to heal and that I don't want my sons carrying forward into their marriage the same kind of wounds that I carried into mine. I want them to be set up differently. So that's the condensed version of a big story, man.
Yeah. Well, I want to travel back. So you said I want to go through, there's a couple different points I want to hear more about because I imagine that a lot of guys can relate. You had the healing journey around 17. You left home, you started that healing process. What was that initially? What was your healing process? What did that look like for you? Because a lot of times we go through this and we're like, I got it until there's new pressure and then the cracks start to show. And that's what it sounds like happened for you. A lot of us don't know that this is going to happen, but this is part of the man's journey. So what was the initial healing process that you went through? What did you rock up until we got to that point where you experienced provider pressure for the
Yeah.
first time?
So I'll tell you what it was for me and kind of what the core of it is and how I came to it. So, man, we ask this question like, am I enough? Every guy like talk about, like, can I handle it? Right? Am I enough? And when the weight hits us and we feel like we're failing, the answer that our life seems to give is you're not enough. uh, Constantly. And I felt like that at 17. Even though I should have been cared for in a family, I felt like I was trying to maintain peace in my home and keep things from falling apart. And that's no 17-year-old should be carrying that level of weight. And I've been carrying it since I was like 12. So the feeling of I'm not enough was there. That my dad, when you're 13, 17, whatever, you internalize what your dad does. Not, oh, my dad has issues. He can't cope with the stress of his life, so he's turning to drugs. You think it has to do with you. So there's something fundamentally unlovable about me. That's why I'm not worth you going to rehab for. Like, you didn't do the work because obviously I wasn't worth it. You asked that question, why was I not worth it? The struggle. And Rob, I carried that question even when I was 32 and knew better. It still sat there somewhere. So I carried that question around as a 17-year-old. Like, why do my why have my dads abandoned me? Like both of them. And my dad had been in out of rehab several times. In my room, there was a book called The Search for Significance. I randomly opened it up. It was a book he got from one of his rehab stints. And I started reading it. It was it was like a Christian faith based AA sort of thing. But for me, it was this idea that like I was created by God and I have intrinsic worth based on that. Like, I am worth love no matter what anybody else says. I have that just within myself intrinsically. It's not based on performance. It's not based on my father. It's not based on anything else. And to me, stepping into an identity that said, like, I have worth in and of myself was really important. So I need to draw like two questions because there's like two parts of this healing journey. When men say, "Am I enough?" I always say, like, what are you asking? Like, for what? Are you enough for what? because it's, are you worth being loved? And do you have what it takes? Are you enough to handle the stress of your life? I'm like, if the question is, are you enough to be loved? The answer is yes. You are worth love just in who you are. If the question is, do I have what it takes to handle the stress of my life? I'm like, I don't know that. That depends on the skills you have and the demands of your life, to whether you can budget, earn money, if you can emotionally regulate, if you have good conflict skills when it comes to arguing with your wife. Those are learned skill sets. So do you have what it takes? I'm like, if you've learned the necessary skills. So, and men get in trouble when they tie the two together. If I don't have what it takes, I'm not worth being loved. That's where we get super rocked. So the first answer came for me at 17, which was I am being worth loved just for who I am. And there was an identity piece that's just rooted in that. Um, for me, I found that in my faith as a Christian. Um, I'm more than welcome to go as deep into that as you want to. My take on Christianity is very different from most people's because I don't call it a
Oh, wow, I'm
religion.
so excited to get into it.
Yeah. I call it a relationship with Christ, which is very different from following a set of rules to gain favor, because that sets you right back into my intrinsic worth is based on performance. And probably the number one lie I hear from men that drive dysfunction in their life is I'm only worth what I can contribute. Right. And when I realized actually my faith is not that. I contribute what I contribute as an outflowing of understanding that I'm loved by God and that I was worth being created by God. And then out of that comes all the stuff that I do. God doesn't look at what I do and then deem me worth being loved. So understanding that piece at 17 was like the first core thing. And then, Rob, I was young for a long time and just like dating my wife, living in LA. The question of do I have what it takes? My life didn't demand that much. I had what it took to be a single dude dating some chick in LA and just working a job. Like that was easy. It was fatherhood that made me dive into that other piece of identity, of like learning. We said this earlier, competencies that lead to confidence, that sort
Mhm.
of reaffirm that first idea. Are you worth being loved? They're like, yeah, God made you for this purpose and you can fulfill it if you stop running from it. So sorry, I'm long winded, Rob. I'm sorry about that, buddy.
Me too. Don't apologize. Don't apologize for who you are. You're innately
That's right.
loved by God, Daniel. He put you here with this purpose to be long-winded. So let's go with it. Yeah. Okay. So, ah, there's so much that I want to talk about. I want to keep us on some kind of track here, and I want to throw out there that I'm back. I'm wearing this guy again. My journey was very much a rejection of doctrine. I don't like rules. I don't like being told. I like relationship, and that's what brought me back. So I really struggle with here are all the laws, here are all the rules, do these procedures, and you're good. I like my inner procedure that gets me into union and contact. So maybe we'll come back to that. You came into now fatherhood. You're in providerhood for the first time. That's a hard moment. We don't know it's going to be a hard moment. There's all kinds of stories about how it's going to be hard. It's something I didn't understand until I was in it. You mentioned the cracks that started to show up and how those came from not really facing and healing the father wound. He had done other work. So what were the cracks that started to show up for you?
So I started this journey at 17 of understanding that I am loved, but it was very surface level. It wasn't deep. And kind of like you, I still had a lot of doctrine that permeated my thinking and my upbringing with my dad. Like a lot of guys, I learned that love was associated with certain things. And my dad was proud of me when I worked hard and when I was tough. My dad, he gets so proud of me. The only time I remember my dad being proud of me was when I did things like that. So we would go hunting a lot when I was a kid. And if we're like at the juvenile hunt, it's like where a bunch of dads take their sons hunting at the beginning of hunting season. If I could whoop the other kids in wrestling matches, my dad would be proud of me. Or if he sent me to work with one of his fireman buddies and I could hang with the adults, right? One of my first job was a fence company. It was just hauling fence posts, bags of concrete, pickets and runners all day long. If I could hang with the adults, my dad would be proud of me. So somewhere it's like, if I don't complain, tough it out, do hard things even when it's difficult, like that's the sum of a man. And those are good things, right? But they're not the sum of a man. They're not the completeness of you and they're not your total worth. But between both doctrine and this, like my relationship with God was formed by men. Really. I didn't see it and I knew better in my head, but I didn't know it in my heart well enough for that to change how I spoke to my wife in hard moments. So, Rob and I got married. I always say I quit pursuing my wife. I started pursuing the provision of my wife and the provision of our family. And for me, my number one thing was not running with my wife alongside me to the marriage we wanted, to the life we wanted. I was running away from the trauma I had. And that can look very similar, but your heart behind it is very, very different. So the cracks would start to form because I was working 60 hours a week, man. I was starting this landscape design firm. I would wake up at like 6 a.m. and be gone, like ready to work. I'd come home at 4 from a day of working, and I'm wearing all the hats. Like I'm digging holes, I'm doing marketing, I'm doing payroll, I'm drawing designs, I'm doing all of it. So I would come home, we'd have a dinner, and then I'd be like, all right, I got to go back to work. I got to get this design together for a client. I got to change the oil on a lawnmower, right? And then I got to figure out, I got to put a job post, like I got to do all the stuff, Rachel. She's like, well, when are we going to spend time together? And because that made me feel like you're not doing enough for our marriage, and I didn't want to be like my dad. I didn't want to be a failure. I didn't want to be losing something. Like, you know how I would respond. I'm like, Rachel, you're not being supportive, or you're putting too much pressure on me, or why are you acting like I don't love and pursue you? I literally just broke my back for 10 hours to provide for our future and the home that you live in. And you're going to tell me I'm not loving and supportive because I'm not going to hang out with you tonight? Like, how dare you? And I would be like a tyrant. And then I would get passive in other moments and I would be self pitying because pride and pity are the same thing, just two sides of the same coin. And I'd say things like, Rachel, you should have married someone different. I'll never be enough for you. Nothing I do makes you happy, in this little pity party. And I would just toggle back and forth because anything that she said that might mean you're not completely providing in all the ways perfectly, I couldn't handle. She may as well have been saying, "You're no better than your father," right? Your mom didn't feel loved. I don't feel loved. Like your dad made your mom cry. Sometimes I cry. She would cry about things, and I'd get pissed off that she was crying. Because inside I had a lot of shame. Somewhere I had two voices at the same time. One, your wife's being wrong. Tell her she's wrong. If she would stop being so high maintenance, she'd see that you're actually a good dude versus look at how big of an asshole you are. You're making your wife cry. You're just like your dad, you piece of crap. Both of these voices screaming at me while I'm talking to my wife. There was no chance that I was going to have the strength to just say, Rachel, you're right. I have prioritized work and I'm not pursuing you very well anymore. Um, I've been pursuing things to alleviate my fears as a dad and as a husband. And like, I've been wrong with that and, and ask for some forgiveness and make some changes. I had too many wounds that because, man, your wounds get attacked. You forget that that's your wife you love. All you see is that's the person attacking me. And it's like, no, she's the person revealing the unhealed parts of you. She's not the person that put the wound there. Um, but man, that's where the weight started to come in. It was like I said at the beginning of marriage, we still had enough lazy Sunday afternoons to like kind of keep things going. But when we had our first son, my wife was wanting more of me, was already running our marriage on an empty cup. But what did my brain go to? It went, oh, now I've got a new responsibility. I got to go harder at work. I got to provide and get these things done. Because one day I thought I'll sell this business for $5 million and then I'll come home. So I'm like, I got to work harder. The time is ticking. And then we had our second kid 3 years later. And now my wife has got two children, emotionally depleted, a very needy second child, a husband she can't talk to, basic. And she would say, I feel like I'm alone. That the responsibility of the home and the weight of raising these sons is all on me. I can't talk to you about it. You're always at work. She's like, I'm not saying you're a bad husband. I'm just saying I'm alone and nothing changes that. And I can't talk to you about it. And then I still kept pursuing work even harder. So now my wife and kids who needed me even more were getting me less and less. And the more I felt like a failure at home, the more the fact that I was actually getting a lot of respect at work made me feel like I need to be here because this is the one place I can point to that I'm not completely screwing it up. And sometimes with my sons, I would say, well, I'm not screwing it up totally as a father yet. And I would pull away from my wife. And dude, so many marriages and guys I work with today, that's the dynamic that they've gotten into. And that's where I got. And if I didn't make like some ruthless changes, we wouldn't be together. I'd be seeing my kids every other weekend. Like, that's hard truths, man.
Yeah, it's what I call the provider paradox. Is we're doing all this for her and for the kids, and then we hear the "I want to see you more" with the model that we've received from our upbringing and from culture. It's like, oh well, I not doing enough for you? And what she's saying is, I want more connection. I want more relationship with you. Meanwhile, we think that, well, I am doing this for you. So what else could you ask? What else could you need from me? And the very things that make us successful outside the walls in work, I call it the sword and armor problem, are the very things that cause the distance in our relationship. It's one skill set, as you've talked about skill sets of multiple that we need to thrive, not just as a provider, protector, but as the one inside the walls of the house, inside the garden. And our house is a garden. That's what it is. They need love. They need our light. They don't need our sword. They don't need our armor unless we need to protect them from something. So what are you seeing in the guys that you're working with this? And how do you begin to help them start navigating this time?
So for me, sort of my approach, it's like three things every man needs: identity, mission, and then a process um, that he could do. But most men, they don't have any sense of identity. That first bit that I talked about, their entire world is wrapped up in getting validation and identity from somewhere else because they came into marriage without it. Their father did not bestow it to them, did not raise them up to know who they are and to have a strong sense of self and identity. They went out into the world searching for it. Guys find it in all different kinds of places, but ultimately, I feel like most men end up resting in one of two places. I'm either going to get it in my wife or my work, like the two W's. That's where we get our validation. And they're both good things. Like contributing well to this world and getting paid for it. That's a wonderful thing that men should do. Being a good husband and a good father is a great thing for us. But when that becomes the foundation of our worth, basically we're telling our wife, you're the person responsible for bearing the weight of my purpose and identity. And that's a burden your wife should not have to bear. You're making her carry a load that she should not have to carry. instead of loving her from a place where you're grounded. Like you can't be an anchor if she's the one who's really giving you your purpose. Like she is the one anchoring you. If that's the case. So the first thing I do with guys is like, do you believe you're of worth? That stuff that I said about God, like, do you believe God loves you? Do you believe you're worth love? Um, and they have to work on where do they get validation? I like this saying. It's when you live your life trying to find your sense of worth for other people, whoever they are, like they are the ones who participate in the forming of your identity and they get to determine it. So whenever they fall apart, you fall apart. Right. And so my wife, she can't have a bad day. She can't go through postpartum depression, which she did because then I cave. I can't be the anchor for my family. Um, so we talk about that a lot. Like, what is your sense of identity? You have to find that. Otherwise, if I take you through the process first, like your health, your budget, your emotional regulation skill, all that good stuff, I'm like, you're going to go back into process oriented thinking. And if it ever fails, if you lose your job, if your wife has a mental thing or a hormonal shift or menopause or something, and your marriage starts to fall apart, you will be shaken and fall apart again too. So start with that, develop your mission. I don't think many men have thought about a transcendent cause that's above the temporal things, right? And I try to get to it real quick with guys. I'm like, when you're in an argument with your wife, what's your mission? Is it self-protection or is it to love your, I say to love your wife in a redeeming way? So I'm like, there's if you're mad at your wife in an argument, there's three things that could be going on. You're wrong, and you need to apologize and ask forgiveness. There's a misunderstanding that needs to be cleared up, or she's wrong. And if she's wrong, why? What lie is she believing? Is it based on something you used to do? Is it her childhood trauma that's coming in? Is she just exhausted from motherhood and just had a crap day? What is it that your wife is handling that's causing her to be that way that you have the ability to free her from if you will stand strong and love her and not go into self defense? But what's your mission right now in the hard moment with your wife? To be right and self defend or to love her in a redeeming way? Right. And we have missions everywhere at work, as a dad, as a husband. So I ask guys, you got to clarify that because that's going to change how you respond. Um, and then, like I said, there's a lot of process stuff of like, all right, so how do you respond differently to your wife? Like, that's a lot of stuff from breath work to saying I feel statements to a lot of the nitty gritty of like the real practical things. Um, but man,
Identity,
sorry, that's a
mission, and
long
then
way back to most men are missing identity.
what are some of the patterns? So that's the work that we can do. But what are some of the patterns that you see before a guy starts getting into this within the marriage, within the house?
The number one pattern is that he tries to fix his marriage through doing more stuff and not becoming a different person. Um, a lot of guys will come to me in coaching and something has happened. There could be drinking, it could be porn, like that comes up a lot. And or not doing enough dishes, right? Simple, like the shared
Not
responsibilities
doing
of
them the
the
right
home.
way.
Yeah. Yeah. All that stuff, like just the shared workload of the home. The wife is carrying the mental load. The husband helps. Like he sees his role as like, this is her domain. She's sort of like the queen here, but I help. I do all the stuff. And she doesn't trust him at that point. If he's looking at porn, she doesn't trust him. If he's drinking and hiding it, if he's spending too much time on social media or not carrying his weight in the chore department, unless she's nagging, roads trust. Over years, the trust gets decimated and bitterness and just like defeatedness set in hardcore. But he keeps trying to do these things. And so I'll get guys who are like, I haven't looked at porn in 2 years. And I look at my phone at 11 o'clock and she's all like, what are you looking at? And she's like accusing me of looking at porn. Like nothing's ever enough for her. She'll never trust me again. I'm like, okay, one, you're trying to define your marriage by the stuff you don't do, and that'll never do it. It's like the bar of I'll divorce you if you do this, right? Or I'll leave you and you're staying right here. Like I'm not doing those behaviors. I'm right here. That's not a thriving marriage. That's a survival state. And as long as you're doing just enough to try to appease her and keep her from going off the rails, that means you've kept your marriage in survival state. You're treading water. You are not swimming and making any progress. But mostly I tell guys, it's not that you stopped looking at porn. If she knows you're still stressed out, you have low self-esteem, that you argue all the time, she knows you're still the man capable of doing it at any moment. And you might just be one fight and bad day at work away from looking at something that you shouldn't be looking at and falling right back into it. She knows this. If she can't trust you to be honest about like bills or to step in a parenting situation like you could, that trust is not compartmentalized for her. She sees you look at your phone at 11, she's going to want to know, what are you looking at? Because of other areas that you have proven untrustworthy. So I'm like, you have not become a different kind of man. You have just modified behaviors. But it takes an insane amount of effort to modify behaviors, especially because you're always thinking about it. Rob, you said you don't like rules. Most men are living under the tyranny of don't do this, don't do it that way. They're exhausted by the rules of their wife. And I'm like, but the only method you've given her to get you to be different is behavior control through griping and, withholding sex and being nagging. You become a different person who does the dishes because it's your home. You want a home that's clean. You teach your kids to do the dishes because you want to raise young men who take care of their space, who are good stewards, who live in an orderly house. And so you lead the kids learning how to take care of their stuff, not your wife trying to get all of you to learn how to do it. And you guys do it to keep mom from being upset. Like, dude, that's a bullcrap dynamic. So getting men to say, again, it's the identity thing. The way I love my wife, the way we run our home, the way I raise my kids, that's what I want. It's from me. It's not behaviors that my wife has asked me to submit to. And now I'm some wife pleasing, the word is simp now. Some wife pleasing
Mhm.
simp that my whole identity is based in, is my wife happy? And dude, I got to tell you, I've seen some really tough alpha male guys fall into this category of being pissed off because they think their marriage is based on not doing bad behaviors and not becoming the kind of man who does good behaviors, right? That's the pattern I see.
Yeah, I'm on the path of service in marriage.
Ugh.
And not serving her, but serving the capital W, we, the two of us together, because we come together, we create something far bigger than either of us alone. And on the outside, service and simp might look really similar. But I think the difference underneath is the reverence and that we're in this together. And it's you and me versus the problem versus anxious anxiety, fear of I'm not good enough, fear of, oh, well, she's going to nag me about this, fear of I'm going to lose her. And it's so easy to fall into that trap, especially when that's what we've seen. And we grew up in the feminized, happy wife, happy life era. And so it seems like it's just the play that we should run.
Yeah, it's a tough thing to have come up in. We always overreact as a culture. It's always like completely give up of yourself and just please your wife, happy life, or it's the opposite. Um, Alpha male, like I got to do this. My way or the highway. It's like, why do we never become what I call whole men and become integrated and realize I can do the dishes not because I'm laying over for my wife, but because like this is my home and I want to do this as an act of love for my wife. Um, but the difference is clear. You said it, it's a we. So that means my wife also builds it with me and has to rub up against things that I think are different than what she does. And I had to be able to stand up for what I think are my ground, but I stand up in a way that considers her, that doesn't get angry, where it's like we're actually discussing what is best for the we when we disagree on the process. 'Cause that's where me and my wife talk about this a lot. We have a shared vision and shared values, but we do not always agree on the process or what it looks like to uphold those values in our day-to-day life. Um, because we're two different human beings. So we have to sit down and have conversations. My wife lovingly calls them discussion mints because I feel like they're an argument, and she's like, it's just a discussion. I'm like, it's a discussion where we disagree and both think we're right. And but man, having humility and backbone at the same time, it's like that's the thing that I feel like culture always misses. It's like humility equals no backbone, and having backbone equals tyranny. I'm like, no, you can hold both in the
Mm.
same hand. That's the only way to provide mental and emotional safety for your wife.
It's bringing the edge of the hard to kill and the easy to love together. Is bringing our
Yeah.
masculine strength and just the depth of in crazy love that we have in here. I truly believe with my son that men are far more emotional than women. We have a lot more feelings, but we're trained to just cover them up, bury them, and then we have all these problems because of them. And so, yeah, holding them in one hand, you're bringing up something, the discussion is so important. We don't know how to negotiate. We don't know how to have uncomfortable conversations. And for us, for a lot of guys, feelings in themselves are uncomfortable. So we want to stop them. And you're talking about how earlier you had the two voices, and one of them was like, "Well, she shouldn't feel this way. You need to stop her from feeling this way." Not your exact words, but that's what's coming through for me. How do we have these conversations? How do we actually have meaningful discussion mints together? How do we navigate conflict? And it's not like yelling conflict, but we have two opposing opinions on something. How do we navigate this?
Yeah. You actually said it earlier. I don't remember exactly what you said, but it was again, it's the we. Like I'm not fighting on behalf of myself. I'm not necessarily just fighting on behalf of my wife. I'm fighting on behalf of us and our home. And and what that means, that's something that me and my wife have talked like we're building it together. We have an understanding of the feeling that we want our home to have, of our family culture. So that's always what I'm fighting for. And I'm always the perspective I have is I'm never fighting against my wife. I am fighting against misunderstandings, trauma. I'm fighting against her hurt from the wounds that I caused 10 years ago that are creeping their head back in. I'm gonna try to tell you this really quick story. It'll take a minute, but it's a good example of a discussion that so I'm doing a lot of fun stuff with my sons, love raising my sons, really big right now into rite of passage stuff for my 13-year-old. And I'm wanting to host these rite of passage weekends coming up for in the future for fathers and sons. So me and a buddy who I'm doing it with got an opportunity to go to a place in Colorado where there's like whitewater rafting, rappelling. It's an ex Navy SEAL guy who runs this kind of like experience for fathers and sons. There's one for fathers and daughters too. Super cool. All in, it's like it's 2 grand, but it's going to end up being like 3 grand all in. And he said he'd give us a scholarship. Now, I don't know if that means $100 or $1,000. I don't know how much it means, but I'm sold on this thing. I'm like, whatever I have to do, I'm going to make this thing happen. And so I come to my wife and I'm telling her who this guy is, what this camp is, that we're going to get scholarship. I'm like, I really want to take Jameson to this. I'm like, she could tell I've already made the decision to go, right? Without talking to her, even though I'm acting like I'm bringing it up. She was like, oh, that's cool. That sounds like a really fun opportunity. She did not sound happy. She sounded hurt. And I was like, all right, babe, what's going on? And Rob, I teach this stuff. I have been teaching it for a while, working on it for a decade. I've had coaches in therapy. So, like, I know the information. But in that moment, when I asked her what was wrong, she said, to be honest with you, I don't feel like you pursue me in the same way you're pursuing our sons. She's like, you've never taken me on an 8-day vacation like that cost that money. And I did what men do. I thought, oh, I'll just introduce some facts. And when she understands these facts, that will change her feeling. That never works. But that's what I did. I said, Rachel, we have 4 sons. We have no way to have a babysitter for 8 days. I would love to take a trip to you. Let's go to Scotland for 8 days. Be awesome. But who's going to watch our kids? I'm like, of course I love you and want to pursue you in that way. I just can't. That's the only reason I haven't. And you know what? That didn't make her feel better. And she was like, what she was saying was, yeah, but the amount of energy and excitement, like I want to see that for me. So she's like, but it's like the date nights, the weekend, like a weekend getaway, like whatever our version of that is, you keep planning it for the kids and I just don't feel like you do that with us. So then I went to another level of persuasion of like, Rachel, I'll pursue you every day. Like I've oriented my whole life around only working 25 hours a week so I could be home with you more. Like we talk every night. Like I do all this. I'm pointing to everything I did, which Rob, all that does is invalidate it. It says, you have no right to feel this way. Look at all the stuff I do and have some freaking gratitude. I didn't say that, but that's what I was thinking. But when I did that, that puts her further into, okay, I've got to convince him that like why I feel this way. So she kept giving more reasons why she was like, I don't feel pursued in the same way you pursue the kids. And by the end of the hour, it got to the point where it was starting to get ugly. It wasn't ugly, but I hit the moment where I was like, I switched from discussion to mad. And I'm about to say F it. I want to raise my voice, which that's you don't raise your voice at your wife. Like that's a maxim I live by. Like you don't do that. And when I was like, I'm about to do it, I stopped and got up. I was like, Rachel, I've got to get up and walk out. I'm too mad. I can't even listen to you right now. I was like, I'm really hurt by what you said. I feel like you're telling me I'm a bad husband again. It's this old stuff, but it's here and I need a minute. She was like, all right, that's fine. Go take some space. So I went outside. For me, I prayed and I had 2 thoughts come to my mind. One of them was, why can you not give up this trip with your son for your wife? If your marriage is first and fatherhood is second, why are you still holding on to this thing? And so I'm praying and I'm like, God, because it's not right. It's unfair. I should not have to give up this trip for her because she doesn't feel pursued when I pursue her all the time. It's like, God, how about you change her opinion or her heart? And then she could be grateful for me and I could go on this trip. I'm like, I think that's what needs to happen. And I don't feel like I can give up this trip without feeling bitter at her for making me do it. And if I go, then I have to feel guilty like I've abandoned my wife. And I was like, I'm pissed that she's put me in this position. And I have a rule that we do not do things if we're not in agreement, like big things. And so not like, can you go take a shower? But a $3,000 investment, we don't do big things without being in agreement. And if we can't get into agreement, we have to work that out. Why are we not in agreement? And we have to discuss it. And so I'm like, okay, well, we're not in agreement, so I don't get to take this trip. And I felt, I felt God telling me, if you, if you go on this trip, knowing it's going to cause a brokenness in your marriage, you have put this above your wife, and that's not okay to do. It's going to cause more harm than good. And then I felt like the thing I heard was, what are you going to lose if you don't go on this trip? Do you think your son's not going to learn to be a good man if you miss this one trip? Is there no other way to teach your son the values you want? This trip is the crux of manhood for your son. And I'm like, no, it's not. It's just a cool opportunity that I want to go do. And so, I prayed. I took about 30 minutes and I went back in the house, still a little mad, but knowing I needed to be humbled. So I said, Rachel, here's what I want to do. I want to table the trip for a second and I want to go back to what you said. You said you feel like I don't pursue you the way I do the kids. Talk to me more about that. Why do you feel that way? I just want to listen to what you have to say. And that made her breathe. And she told me again in this new context how she felt. And what I had to end up doing, this was like 2 weeks ago. So I'm not even super proud of this. So I just had to say, you're right. I have had intentionality with the kids that I've not had with you. And I'm using the babysitter thing as a cop out, to be honest with you. And that's on me. Like I have just been wrong in that. And I know that I pursue you. I pursue my wife. I love my wife. I pursue her every day. And her point was, you pursue the kids every day too, though. But you make extra effort and moments for them because you're so passionate about fatherhood. And I would also love that. I was like, I would love it too. And I have misplaced that priority. I do want to do that for you. I just had to admit that she was right. The evidence is there because the B&B is not booked for me and her. And there's like 3 or 4 of them booked for my sons this spring.
Mm.
So I had to apologize, ask for forgiveness. And then she finally said, I was never telling you not to go on the trip. Never was I saying that. I just couldn't help that when you said it, it brought up for me, I wish we got to do that. And you got upset about it. And dude, to wrap the story up, super cool. When I went outside to pray, I love plants, I love nature and stuff. Yes, that was like 2 weeks ago. Like the other day, I got a book in the mail that was Colorado wildflowers and foraging. And she said, I want you to know, I ordered that book while you were sitting outside because I wanted you to know that even in the middle of the fight, I always wanted you to do this trip with our son. I was like, dang, that's some humble pie
Yeah.
right there. I say all that, you say how to have those meaningful discussions. I set a standard and a rule. I don't raise my voice and I don't get defensive. I let myself get defensive. When I got to the point of raising my voice, I just called it and said, I got to stop. I have to have the mental discipline and restraint to not let my emotions and my hurt and my feelings get the best of me. I got to go outside. For me, that's going to be prayer. I've also called my buddies in my men's group. I've called them before and said, I'm pissed at my wife. I want to be a jerk, and had them tell me, yeah, you are being a jerk. Let's talk for a minute. I've done that too. Or I'll go out and work out. I will do something until I have found my ability to be loving again and go back in and say, I'm going to go and love my wife. Um, and then I went in and did that and it changed everything. So I have a standard. When I started failing, I had the discipline and the restraint to go and do some regulatory, emotional and nervous system regulatory action. In that instance, it was prayer for 30 minutes to untangle the lies and offendedness I had and go back in and love my wife. So I don't know if that
Hmm.
answers that question well for you, but my mission the first time was self defense. My mission the second time was loving my wife.
Yeah, and you came back in to repair and take ownership for it. Here's where I was wrong, and I'm not gonna do that. I'm actually gonna table that because you were right. Here's where I was wrong. Here's where you were right. Tell me about what you were feeling, which is the level that they communicate on, which is so hard for us when we don't have skills with it. I just want to understand you better, which is like something that we do when we're first dating our woman. We talk to her about exactly those things until 3 in the morning. Like, tell me all your feelings, babe. I want to know all of them. And we're able to just listen.
Rob, it's so hard. I feel like a lot of men, and me too, myself too, anything I say about men, if I'm only able to help men because I did it myself, right? And so I'm like, I know what it's like to feel defensive and to attack your wife. But we come into these arguments with all these former hurts that we're still holding on to, and prerequisites. I will be loving if she's loving. I will be serving if she has gratitude. And it is very hard to ask a man to let go of that and just say, I'm loving because it's the right thing for me to do. No matter what she does, that doesn't change my value. And for a man to realize that is what is required to change how your wife responds, because a lot of men want it, they either want their wife to do it first or they want it to be very immediate. Like, I did the dishes. Where's my thanks and support? Right. Or I gave her, when I took the high road. And so why isn't she coming back up? I'm like, but I have yet to see a marriage where a man committed to doing that for a lengthy period of time where his wife didn't turn around and respond. So I'm like, you initiate it. If y'all have been through 3 years of hell because you keep attacking her, and she's probably been attacking too. Wives aren't perfect. Like, she got hurt by you, and then her wounds caused her to be critical and controlling. I get it. But if that's been happening for 3 years and you think 3 arguments of you doing the right stuff is going to bring her back around, I'm like, dude, no. 3 years, you ought to plan for 3 years of coming back around, but it won't take 3 years. I bet 3 to 6 months, and you'll start to see my consistency affected her, and she is changing because I changed. Um, that's a big ask for a lot of guys. So I'm going off on a tangent here, but the hardest marriages are the ones that they're like 8 years into this hell, and there's bitterness. There's so much bitterness on both sides. And then I tell a guy, this is how you repair your marriage. But his wife at that point is angry, bitter. She's a fire breathing dragon. And I'm sending a guy in with his first baby steps into being selfless and using I feel statements and not bringing up past issues and not using accusatory statements and being regulated. His first attempts at it. It's like sending the little squire out to face the big dragon. And it's really hard for a guy to do. So I'm like, the level of pain your wife has to slay that dragon requires a seasoned knight. And to be honest, Rob, that's where like couples therapy and the wife having someone in her corner telling her how to love is a really important part of the equation, so that they slowly start to shift the trajectory. They're both healing, right?
Yeah. Yeah, you brought up calling your brothers and your men's group, and I think the same. I think that especially when we're looking to bring the fire back from the ember that it's burned down to in the relationship, we have to be doing our work. And I've seen that the women that reciprocate, that respond to a man's work the best, are in a similar women's circle, not a feminist women's circle that usually goes the wrong way, but in, they might call it like a divine feminine women's circle, who understand the interplay of masculine and feminine and can work with what we're bringing forward. Therapy is good too. We have to be doing our work together, and that's the thing. Man, we're at an hour now.
Are we at an hour?
We're at an hour. We blasted through this.
Wow.
Well, I want to bring you back, and I want to get into raising men in the future. But right now, I think this is a great place for us to pause, especially when it comes to marriage, leadership in
Yeah.
marriage, and
Yeah.
start
I
closing this
love
thing
talking
out.
about raising boys. The marriage piece is such an integral part of it. It seems like that always comes first, because the father I am today and being able to raise my sons, that that man was formed um, through the fires of marriage, and then that changed my fatherhood. So I often the conversations about fatherhood start with marriage, and it ends up taking an hour to wade through those waters before we get to how do you raise a boy to be a young man. So let's definitely talk about that again one day.
Yeah, it all starts with that capital W, we, before we can be of service to the all. And we have to put in that work so that we can raise more men. And we weren't given the initiations for how to do it, how to be a man to begin with, but then also a leader within the home, a husband and a father. And they're all tied together. It's scaffolding built on the foundation of being right within ourselves.
Good stuff.
Anything that you want to leave the men with and the women with, anybody that you want to leave the listeners with before we wrap up, anything that we didn't hit and that I should have asked, or anything that's just
If I had one thing, I would tell people this. Looking at my life, my dad went to prison for murder. My stepdad was an addict. Me and my mom eventually got divorced. And then, you know, my marriage almost broke because of my workaholicism and father wounds and me being defensive and lacking maturity. We almost broke again during postpartum depression that my wife had after my third child. That was, we didn't talk about that today. That was one of my darkest moments. It was, she changed as a person. There was a huge hormonal shift. And I mean, I was looking at houses for rent down the street to try to figure out. I just didn't know what to do. I mean, I was praying to God every day. God, help me not leave today. How do I continue forth? And we did. We've we've had every bit of brokenness and hard situations, and almost didn't make it in our marriage. And I love my wife today. Like, I love my family so much, and being with my boys. So the message, and I didn't have a ton of money to pay for counseling and stuff. Like I said, like I called friends, I read books, and did some other stuff to start the work on myself. But I was desperate. I was like, I'll do anything. I'll be ruthless about the changes that need to happen. So I think that's what I would tell people. If your marriage is struggling and you're in that place, like, let go of everything in your life and just be ruthless. Like, you have to change careers. Do you have to move? Do you have to? I don't know what it's going to take, but healing can happen no matter how dark of a place you've gotten into. Like, there is redemption, but it takes humility and then work, um, on both sides. But like, I just know that there's hope, because I've lived it and I've seen it in men that I work with. Like, hope is there for those who are willing to go through some of the excruciating process it takes to come out and through the marriage and the hardship of the marriage and not give up and run away from it. That's it, man.
thanks, Tanya. Where can we find you? I know you got something coming up for guys to get involved in as well. Where can we find you and get involved with you?
Cool. So I have YouTube. I just started YouTube, but Instagram is my main page. Instagram is honest underscore fatherhood. YouTube is honest fatherhood. And then, Rob, it's funny. I didn't know my social media page was going to take off like it did. So my Facebook page is just my name, Daniel Gross, but all my content also goes there. So those are my three social media platforms. There's usually links in my bio to stuff that I'm doing, but the next big thing I'm excited about is a men's cohort. It's going to be a very small, limited cohort, so we can really do some deep work with guys. It's called Brought to Bear, and it's on manhood and marriage and how to lead your family. It's all the stuff we talked about today, but 10 weeks with hours of content and homework assignments and group calls. Really cool program. I'm running it with my buddy Noel, who's he's ex SWAT team guy. And just really also has a heart for building men. So that's coming on April 22nd. And if guys hear this, if this does end up going after the 22nd or it's filled up, we're gonna have a wait list. It'll be linked up in my bio on Instagram because we're gonna keep running these programs. I usually do one a month, so there's always a new one coming up. But pretty excited about that.
Ruts Bear, Honest Fatherhood, Honest underscore Fatherhood, Daniel Gross on Facebook. Awesome. All that stuff is in the show notes, guys. So just drop down there to check that out. And that's it. Thanks for being here, Daniel.
Yeah. Rob, thanks for having me. Loved it.
that's listening, thank you for being here. Have an amazing day.